And I know that you're horrible, but I know what kind of God I serve.
Elisha said to Gehazi, tell her, we appreciate the kind concern you've shown us. What can we do for you? Can we put in a good word for you to the king or to the commander of the army? No, she replied, my family takes good care of me. Later, Elisha asked Gehazi, what can we do for her? Gehazi replied, she doesn't have a son and her husband is an old man. Call her back again, Elisha told him. When the woman returned, Elisha said to her, as she stood in the doorway, next year at this time, you'll be holding a son in your arms. No, my Lord, she cried. Oh, man of God, don't deceive me and get my hope up like that. But sure enough, the woman soon became pregnant. And at that time, the following year, she had a son, just as Elisha had said. And one day when the child was older, he went out to help his father who was working with the harvester. Suddenly he cried out, my head hurts, my head hurts. His father said to one of the servants, carry him home to his mother. So the servant took him home and his mother held him on her lap. But around noontime, he died. Look around verse 28. It says this, then she said, did I ask you for a son, my Lord? Didn't I say don't deceive me and get my hopes up? And Elisha said to Gehazi, get ready to travel. Take my staff and go. Don't talk to anyone along the way. Go quickly and lay the staff on the child's face. But the boy's mother said, as surely as the Lord lives and you live, I won't go home unless you go with me. So Elisha returned with her. Gehazi hurried on ahead and laid the staff in the child's face, but nothing happened. There was no sign of life. He returned to meet Elisha and told him, this child is still dead. When Elisha arrived, the child was indeed dead, lying there on the prophet's bed. He walked in alone and shut the door behind him, and he prayed to the Lord. Then he lay down on the child's body, placing his mouth on the child's mouth, his eyes on the child's eyes, and his hands on the child's hands. And as he stretched out on him, the child's body began to grow warm again. Elisha got up, walked back and forth across the room once, and then stretched himself out across on the child. This time the boy sneezed 7 times and opened his eyes. Then Elisha summoned Gehazi. Call the child's mother, he said. And when she came in, Elisha said, here, take your son. She fell at his feet and bowed before him, overwhelmed with gratitude. Then she took her son in her arms and carried him downstairs. As we continue with our thematic theme for the next few weeks on It Can Live Again, I want to talk today from this thought, there is life after a broken promise. Lord, speak, we need to hear. It has been poetically presented to us, which is better, to have never loved or to have loved and lost? That's a critical question. To think about it, many have rearranged it to say, well, I have rather experienced love and lost it, or to never have experienced love at all. I will admit that when one begins to think about that, either one is hard. Which one would you rather have? To have never experienced love, or to experience love but yet still feel the pain of love being taken away? I think that many would perhaps run on the other side. Why experience something only to have it taken away? Why experience the ecstasy and the wonderfulness of something only to then have it tragically snatched from our hands? And I submit for you that life is like that for sometimes. I know that perhaps there's someone that perhaps it was not love, but something in your life, and you're thinking now, I rather have not experienced it. I rather have not even had gone through the place of getting intimate and close to it. I rather have not had it at all than to have it and to lose it. That was really the banner of what we see in this text. And what falls under the prophetic reign of a prophet by the name of Elisha, this protege, and the one that took on the mantle of Elijah. There's a woman we find in 2 Kings chapter 4. We don't know her actual name, but we know she's from a place called Shunem. And literally the text gives her some incredible adjectives. It calls her prominent, and there's some other things that we hear. She is an amazing woman, especially during this particular time. That when we read her story and we get more intimately involved in her life, we see that by herself she stands on her own. She's not given any prestige based upon her husband. We're not sure what has brought some kind of favor and wealth to her family. All we know that this Shunammite woman, this woman that is literally born and raised outside of what many would consider the household of faith, she begins to teach you and I an incredible lesson about the power of faith. Because the story of the Shunammite woman is one where we see one who has it all together. And her astuteness, her discernment is what created this moment of favor for her. In her area, she was getting attuned to a man by the name of Elisha, this traveling prophet, this wonderful man of God. And she would see how he would come in her area, and she remarked to her husband, we ought to do something for him. At the time, there was no Holiday Inn, no Ritz-Carlton. So she made this adjustment. She decided to build a room onto her house just for the man of God. A set-apart segment, a small apartment, if you will. It had a bed, a desk, and a lamp. Those were some comfortable accommodations. The intent is that whenever Elisha would come around, whenever it was in time for him to share in that area, this would be a place he could find refuge. And they offered this to the man of God. Through this expansion, through this room, what they were showing was not just their honor towards the man of God, but in essence, their honor towards God himself. Because in those times, the man of God was literally the proxy, the substitute, the personification of God. And this moment of favor was important. Elisha, who now benefits from this expansion from the Shunammite woman to his own servant Gehazi, decides, I need to figure out what can I do to bless her. Since she has blessed me, expanded and enlarged for me, let me do something for her. He calls her and says, woman, what can I do for you? You have been a blessing to me. You go ahead and name it and I'll give it to you. She looks at him in the eye and says, I'm good, I'm fine. Everything is good with me. We are well off. There is nothing that I see I am lacking in my life. I am completely whole, man of God. I appreciate the gesture, but I'm fine. But Elisha doesn't quit on that. He talks to his servant Gehazi, and he says, what can we do for this woman? I know she says that she's fine. I know she says she has it all together. I know that she says that there is nothing that we could do to add to her life, but there must be something deep down inside of her heart that she truly wants. I know she didn't ask for something, but what can we do to bless her? Gehazi says, well, I'll admit that as long as we've been around, I've never heard the cries of a young child. And I've also noticed that her husband's old. So I think the most appropriate gift, the best thing to do to bless her with Elisha is a child. And they called the woman in, and can you imagine the look upon her face? I can imagine the conversation between Elisha and this woman. He says to her, now I know you didn't ask for this. And I know you said you were fine. And I know that you said you have everything that you need, but I know there's something. So even though you didn't ask for it, this is what I'm going to do. This time next year, you're going to have a child. I can imagine the astonishment on her face. Perhaps this was something she had been wanting for a long time. She had never articulated it and never allowed it out of her lips. Maybe because she had thought that she was of no age to receive a child. She knew how advanced in age her husband were. Maybe that was something she had put out the preview of her mind. She had settled herself in that this would never be something she would have to experience. I can imagine on the initial onset, on this initial gesture from Elisha, she probably thought to herself, this man of God surely has a sense of humor. But a year goes by. And according to the word of God that proceeded from the mouth of Elisha, this woman that had everything that she needed, the woman that didn't think that she needed anything else, was graced and blessed with a son. Can you imagine that she gave birth to this son, this promise that now she gets to feel, and this promise that she didn't ask for? I can imagine there had to be an incredible sense of love and this incredible sense of cherishment that comes in her heart. Now she has this great gift from God, this son that will carry on the lineage and legacy of her family. Can you see her as she weans this son? Can you imagine as she peers into the eyes of this gift from God? Can you imagine as she cherishes every single moment of this promise? I can see this woman walking through her house when her child was sleeping, just to stand there and say, this was a gift from God. This was a promise God gave to me. And every year that passed, every birthday was an acknowledgement of God's goodness. Every holiday, every milestone, every step that this child took, everything that this child did was an acknowledgement of the favor that God had dismissed upon this woman. Until one day, text tells us the child had grown older, had gone out in the field with his father, and all of a sudden his head starts to hurt. Some who've read this perhaps think that because of the intense heat of this area, sunstrokes were not uncommon. And all of a sudden, this son, this gift, this promise, calls out to his dad, "My head hurts." The father sends the boy with the servant back to his mother. And this mother, who was fine, who gave birth to this promised child, as her son now came to her, something happened on her lap. The text says that while he is trying to recover from his head hurting, the text says the boy did not get better. Here's the tragedy of the text. The boy dies in the lap of the mother. The Shunammite woman, who in essence at the beginning of our time of meeting her didn't need anything but was graced with a promise from God. And can you imagine the tension now having this promise that you didn't ask for laying dead and lifeless on your lap? And I began to wrestle with that, to think what could have been going through the mind and the heart of this woman to have this gift, this promise from God, not one that she asked for, not even one that she prayed for, but God graciously gave her. And now this gift, this promise is dead. And I wonder today, who's been in the place of this Shunammite woman? The tension we wrestle with is, I can imagine that this pain, this indelible hurt, to have to deal with the loss of something that you didn't ask for but had cherished, had to bring up tension with the promise giver. I can imagine if it would have been us on this moment, I don't know what could have done, not just tears, but pain probably cascading throughout our very being, to know right there on our lap was a promise that had been broken, a promise that we have cherished that now is lifeless. What do you do when what you have received from God, it feels as if God has taken it away? And I wonder, what dead, lifeless promise have you had to wrap your arms around? I know there's someone that's listening to this message, and you can resonate with this Shunammite woman. You feel the intensity of her pain. You understand what she is wrestling with, because you too know what it is to get something from God you didn't ask for. You didn't ask for the job, but graciously God opened that door, and you got it, and it became a passion, and you worked hard, only to see that job now be lifeless on your lap. Oh, I know you had made up your mind. I'm not going to open my heart up. I'm not going to get in any more relationships. I'm good all by myself. Then out of nowhere, some random message or some chance encounter, you met somebody and you thought it was just going to be a cordial, nice, platonic friendship. And now here you are, and things have progressed. They have now become your soulmate, and you thought that this was it. You weren't even looking for it, but it's a blessing. But now that relationship is lying lifeless on your lap. And I believe there's other instances of promises that you're thinking to yourself, God, why give it to me only to take it away? Why open the door only to close it? Why allow me to experience the beauty of it and now have to cry over its demise? And my brothers and sisters, every now and again, that becomes you and I's plight. That we want to tell God, if you were going to do this, that seems horrible. It paints God in an incredibly angry way. I will admit that this view of God, a God that gives and takes, of God that promises but then breaks it, that kind of God is a tough God to honor. And I can imagine if you were in the shoes of the Shunammite woman, you're perhaps thinking to yourself, what else good is this God? Let me discard this broken promise, get on with my life, hold the anger and angst against God. But this woman does something so incredible to me in this text, that she had all the options at her disposal, but this lifeless promise that she didn't ask for, but she fell in love with, she decided not to give up on it. And by not giving up on it, she decided not to give up on God. Maybe that's the critical, changing, intersectional point of this life that you and I live, that you and I have to make the decision as we oftentimes endure the heartache of broken promises, the heartache of losses after stuff, where we have to come to a reality that I just believe in God enough that I know it's seems like it's over, but I'm not going to give up on it. And by not giving up on it, I'm not giving up on God. Maybe that's God's prophetic word for someone today. Maybe someone who's been trying to figure out what's my next move. You are hurt in despair. You don't know what it is. It feels as if God is putting a cruel joke on you. But I got a word to let you know, maybe this is a moment of faith. Maybe we ought to take the cues from the Shunammite woman who made a decision that when all else fails, my faith will prevail. That even though it might feel and see like it's over, I still got a belief in God that He would not give it to me. He would not grace me with it. He would not allow me to be connected with it, only to take it from me. So what I'm going to do is do what the Shunammite widow did. This woman who had a dead son, she decided that there's still life after this. And I want to encourage someone that's tuned in today that has given up on it. Don't give up on it, and don't give up on God. I know that you want to throw in the towel, but this is not the time to tell God stop the world and let you get off. No, you got to have the faith of this woman in this text and say, I know I'm hurt. I know the promise seems gone, but I believe I serve a God that can resurrect it back into my life. And I need you to hear me. And I need you to receive this in your spirit. Don't give up on it now. I know it came unexpectedly. I know you didn't ask for it. And I know it seemed like it's over. I know you seem to be at the dead end of this experience. But trust me, this woman teaches you and I that there is a life after a broken promise. I want you to know that God can give it back to you. I want you to know that God can raise it up again. I want you to know that God didn't give it to you to break your heart. But maybe this is a moment that God wants to know how strong and how deep and how wide is your faith. He wants to know, are you willing to do some things to improvise yourself in order to receive the resurrection that you trust God for? And I need you to really think through that. And it's a critical point for you and I to wonder. Because once again, I don't believe God gave it to you to take it. But maybe God gave it to you. And now in this moment, you're going to have to figure out, is my faith strong enough to endure the pain and trauma of a broken promise and still believe that God can bring it back? That's what our text invites you and I to understand. This beautifully painted pericope, this amazing textual narrative began to really get me. I will admit to you, I was enthralled with the nuances of this text, because this woman in our passage is not an ordinary woman. She's a go-getter. She's someone that refuses to accept things as they are. And there's a couple of refusals that I see lifted up in this passage. I hope that you ride along with me. My aim in this little sermon is to just lift up some tulips from the text. Let's expose some of the truths of this passage. I really want you to know there were some critical moments of refusal that this woman shows in order to get life after a broken promise. Here's the first point of tension, the first point of refusal we see in this passage is that in order for her to, first of all, experience life after a broken promise, she teaches you and I that we have to refuse to embrace acceptable norms. It's right there in the text. Here's what happens. The critical moment of the text is when she now has her son die in her lap. And she does a couple of things that I want to point out that goes against the norms of that day. The text says she takes the dead son, places it on the bed of Elisha, closes the door, and then remarks to her husband that I need to go see the man of God. That little exchange right there in verses 21 through 23 is very powerful, because her first indication, the first thing I say that how she refused acceptable norms is notice what she does with the body of her dead son. Text says she puts it in the bed of Elisha. Now, truly understand this particular narrative, you have to understand the societal norms of that day. Because in those days, because of the intense heat, and they did not have the modern idea of embalming, the typical thing you would do is as soon as someone dies, you bury them, put them in the ground. You didn't want their bodies to decompose. You didn't have the time, unlike we do today, where we will oftentimes wait maybe a week or a week and a half or even longer based upon the condition of the body in order to have funeral before we do our funeral rites. No, watch the text. That this dead son, that the acceptable thing to do was to bury it in the ground. She decides, watch this, not to bury him, but to place him on a bed. That thing got me, I will admit to you, because each place determines how she viewed her situation. To bury the son meant that she was committing it to a place of finality. Literally, she was performing the final rites, ashes to ashes and dust to dust. If she was put it in the ground, then in her mind, it was an acceptance that things were done. But she doesn't do that. She takes this dead son and places him in a bed. Bed is a place of rest. It is a place typically assigned to people who are sleeping. So where she places her dead son shows what she perceives her son's situation to be. She does not bury it, which means it's final, but she places him in a bed. Let me help you here, because I know the tendency is to oftentimes do what's acceptable and normal. You think that it's dead, so you put it in the ground. But what if we did what the Shumanite woman did, that instead of burying it and signifying that it's final, she put it in a place of refuge and sleep. It's almost like she put him in a place where she believed he could come back to her. And I know that oftentimes, what if I told you that you determine what your situation can become? Because it's hard to resurrect something that's been buried. But what I appreciate that this woman does is, even though it has died, she has not given up on the promise coming back. So instead of burying her son, she places it in the bed. And I need to talk to somebody that's at the point that you feel like it's over. You feel like it will never come back. You feel like your feelings are too far gone. The situation is too dead. Can I tell you, before you say ashes to ashes and dust to dust, before you bury that dream, that gift, that job, that relationship in the ground, can you put it in the bed and say, I still believe that there can be life from this? That's why some of us, instead of burying it, ought to put it in the bed. That's the text. But also notice what she does. She doesn't just put it in the bed. The text says she closed the door behind her. That's an interesting nuance to this particular passage, because it seems to suggest that she did that because she didn't want anybody else to know the situation of her son. This is very important, because her next step after placing her dead son in the bed and closing the door, she then says to her husband, I need to see the man of God. Now, it's obvious, because of the closed door, that this father has no idea that the son has died. Matter of fact, based upon the last encounter with the son, the father perhaps only thought that the son was sick, not dead. So a closed door prevented him from seeing the actual condition of the son, which is why when she asked him, I need to go see the man of God, his initial reason had nothing to do with the son. His main objection was the timing of her request. She says, I need to go see the man of God. And he says, why go now? It's not the new moon. It's not the Sabbath. Not the typical acceptable times that we would even have an opportunity to go see the man of God. It's no festival. It's no special reason. Why go now was his question. Because in his mind, the normal thing to do is you wait to a set time to see the man of God. You wait to the new moon, or you wait to the Sabbath. These were acceptable times to go see the man of God. But this woman understood that I need to see him even though it's not the right acceptable time. I can't wait to the new moon or the Sabbath to see him, because I got a situation that requires his attention right now. I can imagine her inference or the interference she was getting from her husband was perhaps what some of us feel in sometimes our moments of desperation. Because there are times when you feel like I just got to go see God. But there's folk around you who do not know the depth of your despair. So because they don't know what you're wrestling with, they'll assume, well, why don't you just wait till Sunday? You know, Tab Global is playing at 9 and 11. If you miss those, you can tune back in at 5. You have some people that say, well, why are you going to pray now? I mean, there's a separate time. We had prayer night, prayer meeting on the conference call on Tuesday evening. Matter of fact, me and my friends get together on Friday. But here you are on Monday, and you ain't got time to wait till Sunday. You ain't got time to get all your friends together. You don't have time to put on the right pair of clothes. You don't have time to wait until Tab Global is streaming. No, you made up your mind. What I'm dealing with, it goes against the acceptable norm, because when you're despairing, when you're going through, just because some people want to stick to a certain schedule, you made up your mind. I want to see God when I need to see him, and I don't want to have to wait to some prescribed routine, some schedule when I gotta go see God. Can I tell you why I appreciate the dogmatic nature of this woman? Because there are things that go on in my own life. I can't wait till I come to church on Sunday before I try to talk to God. No, sometimes in the middle of the night, sometimes halfway through my day, sometimes while other people are having a coffee break and a smoke break, I need to talk to you, God, break, that I don't have time to have to worry about a certain timetable, because when I need to go talk to God, I need to go right now. I wish I had some folk that can holler back at the preacher in the comment section and say, I feel you, preacher. I don't have no certain schedule to talk to God. I'm grateful I got a God that whenever I get on my knees, he's always available. I'm grateful I serve a God that's not worried about if I got the right shoes on or if my hair is laid the right way. But I serve a God that whenever I need him, I can go to him. That's what Grandma meant when he said, oh, what needless pain we bear, because we don't take everything to God in prayer. It may not be right timing for you, but you don't know what I'm struggling with. And this woman in the text wasn't concerned about the time. She just needed to get to God. That's the story. That for you and I, don't you get so churchified that you feel like only God can be accessible based upon your timetable. I'm grateful I got a God that doesn't have business hours. I'm grateful I got a God that doesn't just work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. I'm grateful I got a God that whenever I need him, he's always available. And there may be some people around you who's saying, why are you trying to go now? Why are you trying to pray now? But they don't know what you're wrestling with. This woman in the text, she did not embrace the acceptable norms. And I need you to understand, don't you bury it, put it in the bed. And don't you feel like you got to wait till the new moon or the Sabbath to go see God. But wherever you are and whenever it is a right time to see your God. She teaches you and I that this life after a broken promise, because you got to refuse to embrace acceptable norms. But there's another little layer to this passage, is that also we see in this text that if you and I are going to get to this life after a broken promise, we have to also refuse to endorse limiting impediments. Her request to her husband was not just about timing, it was also about placement. She basically says, I need one of the servants to get me something to take me to where the man of God is. This is an interesting request, because in those days, you typically did not go to the man of God. You will wait to the specific time and the man of God would come to you. There were certain places you would go that you would meet up with the man of God, whether it's during the new moon, whether it's during the Sabbath, because where the man of God was in his own time was his time to find himself being replenished and refreshed in the presence of God. That for Elisha was Carmel. Mount Carmel was the place where Elisha would go to commune with God. People knew that was not the place to go searching for the man of God, because if the man of God wanted you, he would send for you. But the woman is dealing with a situation that requires her to understand there may be some impediments, but I have to oftentimes overcome what could be sent to limit me. See, the problem not only with Carmel is that it was just a secluded place for the man of God. And typically it was not a place you go to, you are sent for. But it was not an easy journey from Shunem. Some scholars have debated, could have been perhaps between 12 or 15 miles from Shunem. Now understand, in this day of antiquity, that's a long way. That's really outside of what many would consider walking distance. In order for her to go to the man of God would mean she would need something to carry her there. Now here's the other challenge, is that she would not even know where he is. She only had a place, but she didn't have a specific address. But even though he was 12 to 15 miles away, she didn't know exactly where he was. She would have to depend on transportation. She was not going to let her stop her from getting to Elisha. And every now and again, I want to suggest that sometimes you've got to be willing to move outside of your comfort zone. I can imagine that it would have been easier to stay at the house to see if the dead boy would be resuscitated than to leave him on the bed and go after Elisha. But sometimes you got to step out of your comfort zone and move beyond the parameters that even you perhaps on a regular day would think is too far. But when you have lost something, there's no distance you won't travel to get something done that you need done. And so she was willing to find anything to take her from Shunem to Carmel, even if she had to bum a ride, get a horse, get a carriage. She didn't care if she had to catch a train, automobile. No, all she knew is that what she needed was in Carmel, and that's where the man of God was. So she was willing to step outside of an impediment in order to get what she needed. Can I ask you a question? What distance, what impediment, what thing perhaps is causing you to question how far you should go? Sometimes you and I ought to get to the place that there is no depths, there is no ways, and there's no distance that's too far for me to go, for me to get the healing that I desire. At some point, you're going to have to stretch in order to get this. Text says something powerful. That while she makes the journey to find the man of God, when you read this passage, it's powerful. Text says, and Elisha sees her. Isn't it amazing that when she made the step out, Elisha sees her while she's trying to find him? It's a perfect picture of how God sees you and I, is that when we make the effort to see him, when we make the effort to find him, God always sees us. This is what Elisha does. Elisha sees her coming, and he raises a query. He says, what's wrong? So he sends his servant Gehazi. Gehazi is to Elisha, to what Elisha was to Elijah. And so Gehazi goes out to meet this woman. But when you read their interaction, it's a little sketchy because he asked her what's wrong, but she totally dismisses his question. She basically says peace and keeps on moving. Now, Gehazi was somebody she knew. Matter of fact, oftentimes when Elisha wanted to speak to the woman, he would speak through Gehazi. Gehazi was the servant of Elisha. But on this journey, she was not looking for Gehazi. She was looking for Elisha. And she didn't want a proxy for Elisha to find out what she was wrestling with, because perhaps she thought that he would try to dissuade her and turn her around. So she basically told Gehazi deuces and kept it pushing. I wish I had time, because this same interaction she had with Gehazi is the same interaction she had with her husband. Two important individuals, but two important individuals she did not feel comfortable expressing the depths of her need. need. And what I learned from this woman in this moment is that you got to be careful who you share all of your struggles with. That maybe she knew that if I told my husband, he would have stopped me. If I told Gehazi, he would have stopped me. But every now and again, you got to use your spiritual discernment to know you can't tell everybody what you're going through. Sometimes, yes, they're spiritual, and yes, y'all can be cool, and yes, you are friends, but sometimes in order to get to Elisha, you got to bypass some Gehazi. I wonder how many of us have missed out on major moments with God because you've trusted some important information to the wrong people. How many of us have told our secrets and our struggles to the Gehazis of the world, and they're the ones that dissuaded us, talking about, I don't know why you came this far. You know it's already dead. I don't know why you want to go talk to God about it. It ain't going to come back. Sometimes you got to know who you can talk to in your moment of despair, because you don't need pallbearers. You need armor bearers. Y'all don't want to hear me. See, pallbearers are people that take you to your grave, but armor bearers are people that take you to your promise. And every now and again, it's up to you to discern, is this an individual I can tell and trust with my greatest hurt and despair? Not everybody is owed your struggle. Hear me clear. My brothers and sisters, I appreciate this woman because she didn't come for Gehazi, she came for Elisha. And every now and again, I've learned in this journey of resurrection, you're going to face some limiting impediments, some distances, and some people that if you're not careful can persuade you to turn around. But if I made up my mind to go see God, I'm not going to let no distance and I'm not going to let no disciple stop me now. I wonder how many of out there can feel the preacher because you made up your mind. See, you don't know what's behind that closed door. You don't know what I'm lost, and you don't know the pain I had to endure. So excuse me, let me just pass you on by. Let me get to where I need to get get the miracle that I'm seeking. That's this woman in the text. And she teaches you and I that on this road to resurrection, this life after a broken promise, you got to refuse to endorse limiting impediments. But there's something else, and I'm done. One final portion of this text that we also learn in this passage, that if we're going to get to this life after a broken promise, we got to refuse to escape spiritual connections. She bypasses Gehazi, and she finds Elisha. Text says that when she finds Elisha, watch what happens. She clings, falls, wraps her arms around his feet. Now, what's intriguing is, at that moment, Elisha, admittedly in the text, has no idea what her issue is. This prophet, this man of God, this wonderful sage, this anointed emissary of God's goodness and power has now been blinded to the issue of the woman. He asked her a critical question. Is it your husband? Is it your son? But while she's clinging to his feet, notice what she begins to say out of her mouth. It is through her dialogue with Elisha that he now figures out what her problem is. She's basically saying, why give me a son to take it? In essence, she's pouring her heart out in this moment of despair and hurt and trauma. She has lost a son she didn't ask for. But in the midst of it, what gets me is that while she's at a place of hopelessness, a place of despair, as she's pouring out her complaint to Elisha, the text is very clear that she's still holding to his feet. And that thing messed me up in my study, because I know on one hand, you have to admit this was a moment of questioning. This woman is obviously broken. She is down in the dumps, and she's now coming to the very source. She sees Elisha as the personification of God, and she's wondering, God, why be so cruel to me? God, why give me a son only to take it? But while she's questioning the integrity and the intent of God, notice in the text she's still holding on. Her hold is so fast that Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, is trying to grab her from his feet, but she still won't let go. And I started shouting in my study because I see that is a place where you and I oftentimes find ourselves. That's why I know we serve a God that's not afraid of our hurt. He's not afraid of our complaint. He's not afraid of our questions. The only thing God wants to know is why you're questioning my integrity and questioning my ways and questioning if I love you. The only thing I want to know is can you still stay connected? See, too many of us, we question from a distance, but this woman teaches you and I the posture we ought to be in times of hurt, in times of confusion, in times of pain. She teaches you and I that that's not the time to let God go, that you can question all day long, but still stay close to his feet. Do I got anybody here that said I'm going to still stay close to his feet? In February, a girl by the name of Terica Brown went viral. You may not know her by her real name, but she got a surname on the internet. They call her the Gorilla Glue Girl. She got infamous or famous, depending upon whichever way you want to characterize her, because she made a video about how she ran out of hair glue. She made a decision that she would substitute hair glue with Gorilla Glue. She had a problem because the Gorilla Glue she had placed in her head was not coming out. It went viral. People were chiming in. Matter of fact, she had lifted a GoFundMe until finally, after some weeks of pain and terror, a plastic surgeon, African-American male, decided to help her. He was able to cut all the glue out of her head. It was such a major controversy that even Gorilla Glue had to comment on it. Gorilla Glue commented because they were trying to tell people that they knew the strength of the adhesion of the Gorilla Glue. Gorilla Glue is not some ordinary glue. It is what is called industrial strength glue. And what Gorilla Glue wanted to admonish people is that they knew how strong their glue was. That's why they placed on the packaging of their glue a warning sign. And I will admit, curiosity got the best of me. I found myself at the store, masked up and everything, and I wanted to see what was on Gorilla Glue packaging. And when I read it, it was astounding. Because basically the warning was basically saying, based upon the strength of the Gorilla Glue, that you need to make sure that what you put it on, you want to connect it to. Because once you adhere Gorilla Glue to something and connect it to something, you will not be able to separate them. And I want to submit to you that you and I ought to have Gorilla Glue faith when it comes to God. That even in moments of calamity and confusion and questioning, your strong connection to God ought to be so strong that even pain won't separate you. Even toughness and death won't separate you. Maybe that's what Paul meant when he said neither height nor depth, life or situation can ever separate us from the love of God. Can I tell you that I appreciate this woman in the text because her faith was so strong that even in the midst of her hurt, she wasn't going to let him go. That's the text. And watch what he does. He finds out what the problem is. He tells Gehazi, all right, take my staff and go lay it on the boy's face. Gehazi, take the staff, and you would assume this woman would just follow Gehazi. But notice the pleas of the woman. She says, all right, you sent the staff for Gehazi, but I didn't come for Gehazi, and I didn't come for your staff. I came for you. Matter of fact, she raises a statement that shows the depths of her faith. She said this phrase that is only found a number of times in Scripture. She says, as long as the Lord lives. I wish I had time. I got to close this because I'm way over my time. But it's interesting to note that she acknowledges in the midst of her dead son situation that the Lord lives. In essence, she admits, I know what I'm dealing with is a dead son. And the only thing that can raise my dead son is a live Lord. So by saying, as long as the Lord lives, she's acknowledging that you have the power to turn it around. I'm done. She admonishes Elisha, and Elisha acquiesced to request. And so Elisha and this woman are now walking back to the house. This is intriguing. Remember, she rode out to him, but with Elisha, she's walking. They are making their way to the house where the dead boy is. But remember, he had sent Gehazi with his staff. The story begins to unpack and tell us that Gehazi speedily goes through, does not stop, and goes all the way, places the staff on the boy's face, but nothing happens. Nothing. Breath comes back, no eyes open. So he assumes that the staff does not work. He then hurriedly comes back and meets Elisha and the woman on their way to the dead boy. This is intriguing because on the way, Gehazi says to Elisha, I don't know why you're going to keep on walking. The boy's dead. I put the staff on his face like you told me, and the boy's dead. But the woman and Elisha keep walking towards the dead boy. This thing got me because literally what it showed is that this woman understood that the raising of my son was not going to be done by gimmicks, it's going to be done by God. And just because the staff in Gehazi's hand didn't work did not mean that Elisha couldn't do it. And I want to pause here because I think that's the problem with the contemporary churches. We got enough people who get upset when Gehazi's with staffs don't raise up your situation. So because Gehazi with the staff didn't work, now you want to say, see, that's why I don't go to church, and that's why I don't try to pray, because you know how it is, because you have tuned into some gimmicks, not understanding it's not gimmicks that bring resurrection, it's God that brings resurrection. And woe be unto us who's the church that majored in gimmicks but minored in God. And so we got people all wanting Gehazis with staffs, acting as if they could do the thing that only God can do. And I know we got to be careful in this 21st century of finding ourselves idolizing Gehazis with staffs. But Gehazis with staffs gonna fail. They're not always gonna do it. They're not always gonna bring it back. But I'm glad that when Gehazis with staffs don't work, we serve a God that still got the power. I'm done. They make it to the house. I got to get out of here. Text says Elisha opens up the door. He goes in, sees the boy on the bed. And he goes in the process that he heard his master Elijah went through, laid on the boy. Ultimately, see the progressive work of the miracle. The boy's body gets warm until ultimately that you see Elisha lay on him until finally, watch this, the boy sneezes 7 times and opens his eyes. Those 7 in the word, it represents the power, the percentage. It is God's number. Here we see God working through the man Elisha. But what I really want to show you is where the miracle took place. Remember, she placed the dead boy on the bed of Elisha. The bed of Elisha is located in the extra room that the woman built on her house in order to honor the man of God and honor God. Isn't it amazing that the room she had made to make God comfortable is the same room that she got to experience the glory of God. The room she had built in an earlier season was going to be the same place that God would then show her that by her works she would see the faith being brought in by the resurrection of her son. That's why, child of God, hear me, woman, hear me, man, you should not be derided because you make room for God, because in making room for God, you're creating the same space to see God glorified. And I need somebody to understand that sometimes it's the space you make for God God is when you get to see God move at his best. That's what the text tells us, is that then the boy is raised. Elisha then tells Gehazi, go tell the woman that her boy is alive. By indicating this in the text, what we hear is basically this woman was outside. We're not sure where she is, but what we do know is that perhaps she's outside the room while the miracle's going on. And I just want to believe with my sanctified imagination that this Shunammite woman's like my grandma. I want to believe that this Shunammite woman is like some mothers of the church that I knew, that whenever they expected God to do something, they realized it was a pleasure in order to partner with God, in order to see God move in an extraordinary way. They realized I can't got the power, but I sure enough can pray. I want to believe with my sanctified imagination that this Shunammite woman, that while Elisha was in the room with her dead boy, was outside of that room praying. She probably was saying, Lord, I know you got the power. Lord, I know you got the ability to raise up what's dead. If it was old sanctified mother of the church, she probably would have said, Father, I stretch my hand to thee, no other help that I know. If it was a sanctified mother of the church, I bet she said something like, I need thee every hour. I need thee. Oh, I need thee. And just like the God that we serve, he answered prayer. So when they went and got that woman and told her son was alive, this is what I love in the text. She does not rush over to pick up her son, but the first thing she did when she got in the room where her son had been resurrected, she fell back at the feet of Elisha. The Bible said overwhelmed with gratitude. In other words, she just had to tell him thank you before she wrapped her arms around her son. She had to tell him thank you. And I just want to leave you right there to let you know that God can do the raising, but the question is, can you do the thanking? Can you tell the Lord thank you? Is there anybody feeling me? Go and comment in the comment section and said, I gotta tell the Lord thank you. I gotta tell him thank you, because you're the only one that could have did this for me. I gotta tell the Lord thank you, because you don't know like I know what he's done for me. I gotta tell him thank you. Anybody out there say thank you, Lord. Thank you for doing it for me. Thank you for bringing it back. Thank you for being my God. And after saying thank you, she grabbed her boy and went downstairs. I'm going to leave you with this. The father didn't know, but he can imagine. She knew for herself what was dead is now alive, and ought to have somebody that want to give God a praise, because you know what was dead, and you know what's now alive. That's why I praise him like I do. That's why I shout like I do. That's why I preach like I do.